Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session. My name is Maroon. I'm the VP of Operations at Farhat Accounting Lectures, and I'm here to discuss the modification to the SOC reports when a qualified or adverse opinion is being issued. In the prior sessions, we discussed the content of the unqualified SOC 1 Type 1 and Type 2 reports, and SOC 2 Type 1 and Type 2 reports. In this session, we're going to discuss the modifications to the unqualified standard reports when a qualified opinion or an adverse opinion is being issued. Therefore, it is very important to watch the previous sessions and make sure you are familiar with the content of the unqualified standard reports, because in this session, we're only going to show you the modifications, which are slight modifications, and we're not going to cover in detail the content of those reports. Let's start with a quick reminder of the general conditions that allow the auditor to issue an unqualified opinion. The first criteria pertains to the ability of the auditor to gather sufficient, appropriate evidence to allow the auditor to form an opinion regarding the fair presentation of the description and the suitability of the design and the operating effectiveness of the controls in case of a Type 2 report. The second criteria relates to the absence of material misstatements in the management's description of the service organization system. The third condition is that there are no material deficiencies in the design of controls. And the final condition is that there are no material deficiencies in the operation of the controls. This is relevant only for a Type 2 report because in this report only, we're going to provide an opinion about the operating effectiveness of the controls. Now, in the absence of any of these criteria, the auditor may not issue a non-qualified opinion, and the auditor would have to modify his opinion. In the absence of the first condition, the auditor will issue either a qualified or a disclaimer. In the absence of these three conditions, the auditor will issue either a qualified or an adverse opinion. In this session, we're going to cover the issuance of a qualified or adverse opinion because of the existence of material misstatements or material deficiencies. And in the next session, we're going to go over the scope limitation where the auditor is not able to gather sufficient appropriate evidence. Let's go ahead and get started.
Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com.
Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today.
When does the auditor issue either a qualified or adverse opinion? As we mentioned earlier, when there is a material misstatement or material misstatements in the management's description, material deficiencies in the design, or in the operating of the controls, if we're discussing a Type 2 report. Knowing that, how does the auditor determine whether a qualified opinion is appropriate or an adverse opinion? Well, above all, the use of judgment is required. Auditors need to use their professional judgment regarding the extent to which the identified material misstatements or material deficiencies are pervasive. Pervasiveness pertains to whether the issues affect multiple areas or aspects of the service organization's system or controls, or they are confined to isolated incidents or single components. If they represent isolated incidents, then a qualified opinion would be appropriate. However, if they are evident across various processes or control objectives, then they are pervasive and an adverse opinion would be appropriate. Now, under which conditions will the auditor issue a qualified opinion due to identified material misstatements or material deficiencies? The first reason would be the presence of material misstatements in the service organization's description of its system. They need to be confined to one or more specific areas, but not all areas of the system. They are not pervasive. The system description as a whole is still fairly stated, even though there are these material misstatements because they are only in one place. The second condition would be the presence of deficiencies in the design. when some controls, but not all the controls, designed to meet specified control objectives are found to be inadequately designed, affecting only certain areas of the system, then a qualified opinion would be appropriate, since these material deficiencies do not extend to the entire control environment. The final condition is the presence of deficiencies in operating effectiveness when we're dealing with a Type 2 report, when we're issuing an opinion on the operating effectiveness. It's not relevant for the Type 1 reports. So here, when the operation of some controls, and not all the controls, is found to be ineffective, and this ineffectiveness is material, again, it needs to be material, but not pervasive to the whole system. It is limited to certain parts of the system. While these controls fail to operate, the issue is not extensive as to invalidate the effectiveness of the entire system's control. So the qualified opinion is an except for opinion, where the mentioned issue is only the exception and not the general rule. Everything else is operating as intended. Now, the best way to understand the qualified opinion is through an example. So here we have a data center provides hosting services for multiple clients, and one aspect of the SOC 2 engagement is to assess controls related to physical and environmental security under the security and availability trust services criteria. During the audit, it is found that while the data center has implemented several robust security measures, there are significant deficiencies in physical security controls. Specifically, the surveillance system covering critical entry and exit points was non-functional for a significant period during the audit scope. This deficiency is considered material. This is the magic word, material. So we're going to have either a qualified or we're going to have an adverse opinion, because it compromises the ability to monitor and record access to the data center facilities, which is a critical control for preventing unauthorized access. So here we have a material issue, but we need to know more facts in order to determine whether it is pervasive or not. Next, the issue is material as it affects the overall security. However, it is not pervasive. Since it's not pervasive, then the appropriate opinion in this case, as you might guess, would be a qualified opinion. Why it's not pervasive? Because the data center has other effective security controls in place. So only one control is not working, but the other security controls are compensating. So they have security personnel, they have biometric access controls, environmental controls, which continue to function effectively and are not impacted by the deficiency. It's not pervasive. It didn't affect the whole internal control system, and therefore the auditor might issue a qualified opinion. We use the word might because, as we said earlier, it is based on the auditor professional judgment at the end of the day. But based on the provided facts, our best guess is that the qualified opinion would be appropriate, and except for opinion, because except for the ineffective surveillance system, the data center's controls related to physical and environmental security are suitably designed and operating effectively. Next, we'll be looking at the modifications to a standard SOC 1 report due to the issuance of a qualified opinion because of identified material misstatements or material deficiencies. Most of the report will remain the same. In fact, only one section would be modified, which is the opinion, and everything else remains the same. From the report title to the addressee scope, the responsibilities of the service organization and the service auditor, inherent limitations, the description of tests of controls. This is for the Type 2 report only, because we conduct tests of controls only in a Type 2 report, or the other matter paragraph for the Type 1 report only, because in a Type 1 report, we add another matter paragraph mentioning that we did not test the operating effectiveness of controls. The restricted use paragraph, the signature, city and state, and the date of the report. There is no need to change any of these sections because the change in the opinion from a non-modified or unqualified opinion to a qualified opinion will not affect any of the matters described in those paragraphs. Now, what are the modifications to the opinion paragraph? First, a separate paragraph should be added before the opinion paragraph describing the specific reasons and areas affected by the issues that led to the qualified opinion. Also, the title of the paragraph should be changed to qualified opinion. We need to indicate that the opinion provided is a qualified opinion even in the title. We need to make sure that the readers are aware of that. And finally, we're going to add one sentence to the opinion paragraph to reflect the qualification, and the sentence begins with except for. So a qualified opinion is an except for opinion, except for the matters referred to in the preceding paragraph, in the separate paragraph here. In all material respects, based on the criteria, everything else is the same here. The description still fairly presents the system, the controls related to the control objectives are still suitably designed, and the controls operated effectively. So everything else is good except for the matters referred to in the paragraph. Moving on to the SOC 2 report, and we're still discussing the qualified opinion because of an identified material misstatement or material deficiency. Also here, there's no much change except for two paragraphs. The first paragraph is the service auditor's responsibilities, where one word should be added, which is the word qualified. Before opinion, we need to mention that the opinion being provided is a qualified opinion. So the service auditor believes that the evidence the service auditor has obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for the service auditor's qualified opinion. And the second paragraph that requires modification, I know that you guessed this one, the opinion paragraph. The modifications to the opinion paragraph for the SOC 2 report are not that different from the SOC 1 report. So we're going to still add a separate paragraph to explain the reasons for the qualification. We're still going to change the title to qualified opinion, and the auditor's opinion paragraph should be amended to reflect the qualification. We're adding the same sentence except for the effects of the matters described in the preceding paragraph. In all material respects, description fairly presents the system, the controls stated in the description were suitably designed, and the controls stated in the description operated effectively throughout the period. Now we're going to move on to the conditions under which an auditor would issue an adverse opinion, and the conditions are basically very similar to the conditions under which a qualified opinion would be issued. However, there's going to be a pervasiveness in the effect, not only material, but pervasive. So regarding misstatements in system description, this implies that the inaccuracies or misrepresentations in the system description, they are significant and widespread across the entire system, fundamentally misleading users about the nature of the service organization systems and processes. It's misleading, it's unreliable. An adverse opinion would be issued that the system description does not fairly present the system that was designed and implemented during the period. The second reason for issuing an adverse opinion is because of deficiencies in design that are both material and pervasive. They are pervasively inadequately designed, meaning that the design flaws are so substantial that they affect the entire system. They are not only confined in one aspect, but affect the entire system, indicating a system failure to meet basic control objectives. Final reason would be deficiencies in operating effectiveness. Only in type 2 we could find this condition because we're providing an opinion about the operation of controls and they are pervasively ineffective. This pervasive ineffectiveness suggests that the controls fail to function as intended across, again, the whole or entire system. It is pervasive, leading to widespread failure in managing risk or achieving control objectives. Now, what are the modifications to a standard SOC 1 report due to the issuance of an adverse opinion? Again, there are not a lot of changes because the report title, the addressee, scope, the responsibilities, the inherent limitations, description of tests of controls, other matter, all these paragraphs remain the same: restricted use, signature, city and state, and the date. They are all the same. Only the opinion paragraph should be modified, and it should be modified as follows. A separate paragraph, again, should be added before the opinion paragraph, describing the specific reasons and areas affected by the issues that led to the adverse opinion. Also, the title should be amended. It should be an adverse opinion paragraph. And finally, the auditor's opinion paragraph should be amended as follows. In our opinion, because of the significance of the matter or matters referred to in the preceding paragraph, in all material respects, the description does not fairly present. So here it's a conclusive opinion, it's a sharp opinion, it's the opposite of an unmodified or unqualified opinion. We are saying basically to the users that they cannot rely on the description of the system, and we're saying that the controls related to the control objectives were not suitably designed to provide reasonable assurance that the control objectives would be achieved. And finally, the controls tested, which were those necessary to provide reasonable assurance that the control objectives stated in the descriptions were achieved, did not operate effectively throughout the period. Again, C is only for the type 2 opinion. Now, what about the modifications to a standard SOC 2 report due to the issuance of an adverse opinion? Similar to what we did to the SOC 2 report when there is a qualified opinion, we're going to change also the service auditor's responsibilities to add one word, which is the word adverse before the word opinion, to make it clear that the opinion that we're issuing is an adverse opinion. The rest is the same except for the changes to the opinion paragraph, where a separate paragraph should be added. The title would be changed to an adverse opinion. And finally, the opinion paragraph should be amended as follows. The same sentence here, because of the significance of the matters referred to in the preceding paragraph, in all material respects, the description does not fairly present the system. The controls stated were not suitably designed, and the controls stated in the description did not operate effectively. Now let's try to solve a multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com. Which of the following scenarios is most likely to result in an auditor issuing an adverse opinion in a SOC 1 report? In our mind, we're searching for an answer choice that has either a failure of the service organization's description to fairly present the system, or the controls are not suitably designed, or the controls are not operating effectively. In answer choice A, the auditor identifies that the encryption controls for protecting financial data are not applied consistently across all data centers, but are effective where implemented. So do we have an issue here? Yes, there is an issue because there is a lack of consistency in applying encryption controls. This is a concern, but does it necessarily lead to an adverse opinion? So whenever we have a question with most likely or least likely in it, we have to pick the best answer choice. We might have two good choices, but we need to pick the best one. So we're going to keep this answer choice for now, but it doesn't seem very convincing because this does not necessarily indicate that the entire system's controls are flawed or that all financial data are at risk. This scenario might lead to a qualified opinion due to the limited nature of the deficiencies. Now, what about answer choice B? It is discovered that the descriptions of internal controls in the service organization system are significantly misleading and provide an overly positive view of financial reporting practices. Here we have a situation where the system description is significantly misleading across the service organization, which directly affects the reliability and integrity of the financial reporting process. Such pervasive and material inaccuracies in the system description justify an adverse opinion because the entire system is not reliable. It is misleading. The issue is not confined within one aspect, but within the whole entire system. In answer choice C, the service organization restricts access to information about certain controls, preventing the auditor from gathering enough evidence on those specific controls. So here the auditor was not able to gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Does this lead to an adverse opinion? No, it is a scope limitation, and it may lead either to a qualified opinion or to a disclaimer of opinion, but not an adverse opinion, because here there is no material misstatements, no material deficiencies. The auditor was unable to audit from the first place to identify those material deficiencies or material misstatements. The same thing applies to answer choice D, where the auditor is unable to verify the effectiveness of year-end financial reconciliation controls due to insufficient documentation provided by the organization. So here, the magic word is unable. Whenever we see the word unable, means the auditor wasn't able to gather sufficient appropriate audit evidence, and this is an issue with the audit itself and not an issue with the system description or the controls. So here we can't issue an adverse opinion. Also, we're going to issue either a qualified opinion due to the scope limitation or a disclaimer of opinion. What should you do now? You should go to Farhat lectures, look for additional resources to help you with your exam preparation, and especially for your ISC CPA exam. Thank you for watching and happy study.